Ladies and gentlemen, today I get to do one of my absolute favourite things, which is discuss goalkeepers, goalkeeper boots, goalkeeper gloves with the one and only Tom Delair Football. If you're not already following on Instagram, please go over and do that. Of course, as always, get subscribed to this channel right here. Tom is my goalkeeping expert. If you haven't seen before, he frequently comes on the channel. He does all of the goalkeeping glove and boot reviews. We will have more for you throughout the course of the new season, but the Euros has just finished, so we thought what better time to have a chat. So we sat down, we had a nice long chat about what boots keepers were wearing this particular Euros tournament, why they were wearing them, and how some companies are starting to overtake others. I hope you enjoy it. Let's check it out. Me and Tom having a good old natter.
Now, we're here today, obviously, to talk boots, but it's a topic personal to you and I, goalkeeper boots. Now, I figured the way we'll do this is obviously Euros just finished up. On that note, are you okay?
As you'll notice, I went with the Denmark jersey as opposed to the England jersey today, because the England one is stained with tears. So we've just gone for the Kasper Schmeichel Denmark jersey instead.
Yeah, understandable.
It's been a rough day.
Yeah, commiserations, but best you guys have done in a while.
A very long time, and yeah, I think in the end you can't be too down about it. Got to a major European final, which I think is a huge positive. And I know people are very disappointed and they're kind of feeling let down, and people are pointing fingers at penalty takers. But honestly, we got to a final, we got to penalties against Italy, and there's a World Cup a year away. So I'm not. Obviously, it's fairly tragic and devastating, but there's lots of positives. That whole team's 25 years old,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of football to be played yet.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Now, goalkeeper boots. We've been talking about doing another goalkeeper boots video for a while, but I've kind of cheated this time, and I thought there's just been a major tournament on. Let's just see what the pros prefer in goal. So me being the statistics nerd that I am, I've gone through and I've had a look at what every keeper at Euro 2020 was wearing. So let's just dive straight into it. What do you think was the most popular keeper's boot at the tournament?
Oh, that's a good question. So it's going to be an Adidas or a Nike boot. So Predator Freak. This is why they call him the BootWizard people. He knows a thing or two. We had 5 keepers in the Predator Freak. We had Vaslik from the Czech Republic, Martin Stecklenburg from Holland, Wojciech Szczesny from Poland. Then we had Robin Olsen in the low, and the player of the tournament, Donnarumma, in the laceless plus model. Now, okay, the Predator Freak had 5 keepers wearing it, so it wins the battle, but it kind of cheats a bit having 3 different variants, doesn't it? Which one would you wear if you were in goal? The low-laced is pretty much my answer to all questions regarding the Predator Freak, because I don't like the laceless. I just don't like the feeling, the sensation. The mid and the low are essentially the same boot, and the mid doesn't look as good as the low, and I don't see any benefit in having that kind of mid-cut collar. So the lockdown with the laces is super important. The adjustability is super important, especially if I'm in goal. So I definitely don't want laceless, and then the low just looks better than the mid for me. So yeah, low and laced all day long.
Have to agree with you. I haven't tried the Freak laceless, but I had the Mutator laceless, and it just felt sloppy on side-to-side movement. I couldn't wear that in the 6-yard box.
Yeah, it's it starts to feel dangerous, and you start to feel like you're not getting enough traction or responsiveness out of the boot with anything laceless. And some of the new laceless boots are fantastic, but you still can't beat laces, especially in a position where that feeling of just being solid and having that quality side-to-side movement is such a big deal. I think laces all the way, never laceless.
Couldn't have said it better myself, mate. Now, moving on to second place, the Puma Ultra,
there was 4 keepers wearing the Puma Ultra. We had Daniel Bachmann from Austria, Jordan Pickford, your mate from England, Hadrecki from Finland, and Rui Patricio from Portugal. Now, let's talk speed boots for a moment. The Puma Ultra's up in second place. I'll tell you now, we're not getting to the Mercurial for quite a while on this list, and we're not even talking about the Adidas X tonight. Are you surprised by that?
I'm surprised that the Ultra is quite so high up. I suppose, like, obviously brands will push certain boots to certain positions, and obviously Puma are trying to get their keepers into the Ultra. And I don't quite know why the Ultra is the one they're pushing for the keepers. I suppose if I look at them side by side, I almost feel like the Future Z's may be a better fit as a keeper's boot for what I would maybe traditionally expect. So I'd say that's fairly surprising. The Ghosted, I'm not surprised at all that it isn't on the list, because it's too thin, it's too barefoot, and having to hit those long balls, having that crazy aggressive sole plate, maybe not enough flexibility. I'm not really surprised that, lateral movements and things, that the Ghost is not on there. And I think the Vapor would be on there if more keepers were maybe choosing the boots themselves rather than having brands push boots to them. That's my theory anyway, because I think the Vapor is actually a very good boot for keepers, especially with that slightly adjusted tooling on the new 14. But Nike don't want it to be seen as the goalkeeper's boot. They want that to be for their wingers and their Ronaldos and things like that. So, but the Ghosted I don't think is a great boot for keepers at all.
It's a little bit unfair, isn't it? People sort of think the goalkeeper should have boring boots, but our footwork is just as crucial as any position.
The footwork is like more than half of the battle when you're in goal. If the footwork's poor, it doesn't matter how athletic you are, you're not getting to the ball, you're not in the right position to make the save. And being able to move quickly and feel, like I say, I always talk about the responsiveness of a boot being super important for goalkeepers. And I think in this instance that just having something like a Vapor, which is super responsive, would be very beneficial. Yeah, people are like, oh, keepers, give them a Copa Mundial, they'll be fine. Doesn't matter.
That old chestnut. All right. Moving on now, you mentioned the Future Z, and that's exactly where we're going for equal third, tied in with the Copa Sense 0.1. So our future wearers, we had Dimitrevski from North Macedonia, Jan Sommer from Switzerland, what a tournament he had, and also Kakir from Turkey. In the Copa, we've got Manuel Neuer, Peter Galacci, and Unai Simon from Spain. Now, that's a good showing for Puma at this tournament. They've traditionally been the little brother in the big three. Are they on the up?
I didn't realize, I probably subliminally noticed that obviously there's more Puma around, but not specifically keepers. So I hadn't realized that Puma had essentially, between their two main lines, dominated the boots for keepers at the tournament. I think Puma generally have been on the up for a couple of years. I think they've been doing some really great stuff. And what they have been releasing has been great. The future models and the Ultra, especially since they, I know a lot of people are fans of the One. You were quite a big fan of the Puma One, were you not?
Puma 1-1.
The 1-1
of that. In fact,
oh, hold on, here he comes. There they are.
Here they are. Still got them. I didn't mind these at all. These were quite enjoyable, although they were plagued by sole separation. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
But while they lasted, they were a very enjoyable boot. I didn't mind them.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people kind of enjoyed some variation or other of the One, but I think the Ultra is a far superior boot to that overall. And I think Puma having a proper speed boot, even if it's not for keepers, just in general, really elevates the brand and makes them more of a viable option. And now they've got the speed boot, which is the big brand, the big kind of category that somewhat sells itself. And they've got a few big names in that, like Griezmann. But then they've got the Future Z, which is this kind of different style of boot. It's almost their control boot. But they've got Neymar in that. So they've got two boots that are definitely delivering from a marketing point of view, and the Ultra I think is fantastic. So the Future Z is a boot that I haven't really got on with just yet. It's not a bad football boot, and it has some good elements, and sometimes as a reviewer you kind of accept that, okay, a boot is reasonably good, but I don't like it. And that's kind of how I feel about the Z, and I don't feel like it's going to really catch on in its current form. And I think that the previous generation was better, to be honest. It's got some good elements. The sole plate's nice. The touch on the ball's pretty good. It gives that kind of like slightly more padded feel compared to some of the other stuff that's out there. But yeah, for me, I'm not... the 6.1 on the 5.1, really, I used a lot. The Z, I'm kind of steering clear of at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, I hear you on that. For me, it's a boot I want to like it, but I'm just not in love with it the way I have been with like the Future 5. That was a great boot.
I totally agree. I really want to love this current generation of Future, and I just don't. But I think there's enough about it to make people go out and buy it and make Puma, like you say, Puma are on the up. I think that what they're doing is great stuff. What they do need to do though is sort out their sizing, because I know a lot of people, they bought Future Zs, they bought them in their regular size, and they definitely run long. And then everyone's just sending them back and not bothering buying another pair because they're like, oh, they fit weird. So they're not helping themselves. Half down. If you take anything away from this video, half down in the Future Z is it.
Now, we're both Manchester United fans. So speaking of Unai Simon and his Copa Sense .1s, were you surprised to see him starting ahead of De Gea? And do you think we're going to see De Gea at United next year?
I wasn't surprised to see him start. He'd been starting for Spain for a little while, and I kind of anticipated him starting to the point where I had a European fantasy football with a few of my friends, and De Gea was an expensive option because he's a name, and Simon was the cheaper Spanish option. So I managed to get him into the team. I was like, oh well, Spanish goalkeeper for reserve goalkeeper money. So I was ahead of the game there. Yeah, I unsure on whether De Gea stays or not, to be honest. He kind of redeemed some of his recent form towards, like in last season, he had some great moments, and it's not like he was completely overshadowed by Henderson. I think he's done well. I think United have got a big decision to make, because I think one way or the other, they're potentially going to lose a great goalkeeper, and they need to back one of them.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Now, we've barely touched on the Copa Sense .1 in this equal third position, and I haven't worn it myself, but honestly, from everyone I've spoken to that has worn it, it's just meh. That's why we haven't touched on it. It's okay. It's a football boot. There's not a whole lot to say.
Yeah, I've not worn it myself either, and as you say, everybody that I've spoken to who's worn it, everybody I know, the Plus and the .1, they find it a bit of a disappointing football boot, if not the lack of leather that's actually on it, and then the quality of that leather. Yeah, it's like the toe area of the boot, and then the quality of the leather that's on that is also pretty poor by modern day standards. If you go back 15 years, all right, it's good, but if you can put it up against things like that Mizuno are putting out, and realistically that's what Adidas should be aiming to do with their leather boots, it's just not even close. So yeah, the Sense .1, the Sense line in general, seems to be one to avoid from general reports and generally what's going on, which is, it's tough to say for something that carries the Copa name. But I've been saying for a while that I think Adidas and Nike both, like, they don't want to make a leather boot, but they feel like they have to. They need to have that line, that heritage kangaroo leather line. But it's like they gave all of their designers and all of their tech guys all of this information, like, right, make me a boot, but it has to be leather. And the guys are like, damn. Like, so, and then they're like, right, so this much leather. And because they feel like they can do more with other materials, but they have to have that leather line available. And as a result, it's kind of suffering.
Moving on to equal fifth, which is two boots, which both, as of today,
became obsolete models. So we're talking about Thibaut Courtois and Hugo Lloris in the Tiempo Legend 8, and Dominic Livakovic and David Marshall in the Nike Phantom GT. Now, today, Nike have just gone and dropped on us the Legend 9 and the GT2, although I'm not convinced that the GT2 deserves to be called a successor. Yeah, interesting. Even the Legend 9, there's some mixed reviews swirling around it. The Tiempo rather is not really a boot you know a whole lot about for obvious reasons. So I'll probably address this one for you.
Please do.
The Tiempo's traditionally been the go-to goalkeeper's boot, but only 2 keepers have gone for the Tiempo this time round. I honestly think that's just because the Legend 8 was underwhelming. I know I've criticized a few boots in this video, but it was comfortable. It did a job. You couldn't hate it. You couldn't be mad with it, but it didn't give you the things you buy a leather boot for. So I think a lot of us have got high hopes for the 9. We'll see if things can turn around there. Now, moving on to the GT, both Livakovic and Marshall both went for the low. Do you feel like the GTDF's just a bit of a waste of a boot? It's just the low with an inch of material added.
I think the same about the GTDF as I think about the Superfly. They're pointless. Like there's no reason in having this little bit of material that sits at the top of the boot. Like, it doesn't achieve anything. It's just for looks. And you know what? I wouldn't be against it if you didn't have to pay €20, $30 more for this little bit of Flyknit just here. And especially in the case of the GT, I think it's detrimental to the looks of the boot. The Superfly is a good looking boot. The GTDF is not a good looking boot in my opinion. I think it kind of ruins the design, and the low is much nicer. And I do agree with you as well. I think the GT2 is barely a GT2 by the looks of things. We will, of course, have a pair on the channel to review fairly soon. They're already on the way to me. But yeah, it looks like a brand new generative texture pattern that looks similar to what we got on the Vision 2. So it looks like they've taken a similar concept to the Vision 2, applied it to the GT2, and nothing else has changed. And they've called it a brand new boot. And that, for me, I've said this before about multiple boots. I usually have a go at Adidas about this. It's a running change. It's a change that you do, like maybe after a year, but you don't update the name of the boot. That's just a Phantom GT with a small modification. This in no way justifies being a brand new drop of a GT2. Although I will give Nike, I suppose, a little bit of credit in the fact they haven't massively hyped this drop. Like, there's no press or information about it. It's just all of a sudden there's like, oh, here is this new colorway for the new pack, and we've added a number to the end of the, to the end of the name. They haven't actually made a big deal about like it being better or new tech or anything. But yeah, it's a Phantom GT. As far as I can tell from what I've seen, it's not a GT2.
Yeah, it seems that way. The GT's not a bad shout for a keeper though, is it?
I really like the GT as a boot. Now, I'm probably one of the GT's biggest defenders in terms of, like, there's a lot of people who have, I think yourself, you had some problems with the heel and things like this. And I've never really had too many problems with it. I have 2 pairs. I have an FG pair and I have an SG pair.
Good. So we're down to the Lone Rangers now, the boots that only attracted 1 keeper. So I'll run through them briefly. We had Danny Ward of Wales in the Superfly 8, our only mercurial wearer at the tournament. We had Bushan of Ukraine in the Furon V6 Plus from New Balance. Bit of an underrated boot, maybe deserves a bit more press than it gets. And then Anton Shunin of Russia in a boot you might have heard of. It's called the Adidas Nemesis. Are you familiar with it?
Never. But what's one of them? Like, is it any good? Like, would you think I'd like it?
I reckon you might vibe with it personally. It's just a feeling I've got. It's surprising, really, to see the mercurial so far down a list of boots. This doesn't happen.
I have a theory on this, and it comes back to something I said earlier. And yeah, the Mercurial is never that far down a list of boots, ever. But my theory is simply that the bigger the team in the tournament in terms of its national standing, the more likely the players are to be on certain contracts with certain brands that state you have to wear this boot or things like this. The further, and this is not to try and disparage Wales in any way, but the further down you go, you end up with players who are maybe playing lower leagues, they have lesser contracts, and then maybe just their contract could state that they just have to wear a boot from that brand, like, something new, doesn't matter what it is. And I feel like that's what's happened with the Mercurial. Mercurial at Nike are pushing these particular boots to particular goalkeepers for the slightly larger clubs, and then some of the lower, the lesser, smaller nations in footballing terms. I needed to word that better. Oh my God, the comments section. Yeah, so I reckon he's just been able to, he's like, you can wear a Nike boot, and he's gone, I like the Mercurial, he's wearing the Mercurial. And the other keepers haven't really had that option, is my theory, but it is still strange to see a Mercurial not at in the top 2 of anything.
Yeah, definitely. Now, there's 2 keepers I've left off the list until this point, and that's because they're not wearing a current model. And they are Kasper Schmeichel, who was wearing the Adidas Predator 19.1, and Martin Dubravka, who was wearing the Nike Phantom Venom. Now, Schmeichel, I've seen him at least training, possibly some Premier League games in the Copa Sense .1. He's just not vibing with it, I don't think. He just keeps going back to his Predator 19.1s. So I don't know what's going on there.
Totally agree with you. I think he's picked up, or he's been given by, again, Adidas, this new Predator, or new Copa in this case. These are the boots that we want you to wear, and he's just not feeling it in any way. And Schmeichel seems to be a keeper that likes a particular type of boot. Like, we've seen him in the older remakes of the Accelerators and things like that. And that's the style that he seems to like. And the older Predators, with just that kind of more consistent touch, the Predator has that slightly padded feel to it. It's not padded, but comparing it to other things, it was, in my opinion, an excellent goalkeeper's boot, apart from I maybe would have changed the sole plate out slightly for something, you know what I mean? But on the whole, I think it's a very good boot, and I'm not surprised to see Schmeichel, who seems to be very particular about this type of boots he wants. He'll wear different things, but it has to conform to certain things that he wants in his boots. And he seems he's a player, an individual that's very proud in everything he does, like playing for Leicester, playing for Denmark. And I think being at the tournament, he was unwilling to take any risks. He's not willing to wear something that he's not 100% with. And he's just like, I'm wearing the old Predator for this because I'm not risking any kind of mistakes happening. That's my theory on the wonderful Kasper Schmeichel.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, the Predator 19.1, it's one of those, if your kit bag got stolen out of your car and a teammate was like, oh, I've got a pair in your size, or what are they, Predator 19s, you wouldn't be upset.
No. I've never, the boot is not mind-blowing, and I'm sure I've said this in another video, it's never set the world on fire, but is there anything fundamentally wrong with it? Not really. It's a very solid football boot. Yeah.
Does the job.
Absolutely.
Martin Dubravka in the Phantom Venom. Phantom Venom doesn't surprise me. In its day, it was the most popular keeper's boot in the Premier League, but he was wearing the anti-club plate, which most professional players hate, and it's a summer tournament. What on earth is going on there, Mr. BootWizard?
It's a really good question. I did notice that he had the anti-clog plate as well, which would generally mean that what he's wearing is likely to be a retail version. So he's not even wearing a Venom in a particular maybe it's not even custom fitted to him potentially. He's just, because all the pros don't go for the anti-clog, like quite simply, they just don't. They don't like it, and I don't really. I get, like you said, I get him wearing the Venom. The Venom's a good keeper's boot. I really enjoyed the sole plate for keepers on that. Having the clean striking surface, the lockdown response. It's a very good boot for a goalkeeper. But he just, honestly, his boot looks like it's something he's maybe picked up off on sale. Is he not getting paid enough somewhere? He's found somewhere that's got him on sale at 60 euros a pair and just bought himself 10 pairs and gone for it. Which again might call into question his contract. Like maybe he's not under contract, but if he wasn't, you might expect him to be wearing full blackouts of a variety of things.
He's just jumped on the Black Friday deals at Lavelle Soccer or something. I don't know what's going on with his boots.
Yeah, that's the one that the non-anti-clog plate on his boot is the one that surprised me the most, and I was like, I don't know what's happening here.
No, strange. So that is the boots of the keepers of Euro 2020. Now, wrapping it up, we had 10 Adidas, 7 Puma, 6 Nike, and 1 New Balance. Good showing for Puma, not so much for Nike. They're usually on top.
I feel like Nike have... This is probably the first time that I'm sure we will make another video about something like this further down the line. And I don't think we'll see Nike start to climb up that table at all, because their current direction seems to be to sponsor less players. They're really going for a quality over quantity approach. So back when they were first trying to really impact and get in with the big boys with Adidas, they were signing everybody. That was their strategy. Maximum exposure. And then it seems that maybe with the pandemic and things like that, they've taken a different approach and they're really slimming down their profile to a certain type of player that is of a certain quality. Now, it doesn't mean that they're the best players. They let Robert Lewandowski go. You know, he's no longer a Nike athlete and he's one of the best strikers in the world. So it's not necessarily quality of player, it's the type of athlete that Nike want to represent them. These are usually young athletes with a big social media presence that have, a certain viewpoint on the world, on the game, and are seen highly respectable in kind of social circles, which is why I was so surprised that they let Sterling go to New Balance, because he seems to fit that Nike mold quite well. And I feel like they're just willing to let goalkeepers go at this point. Like if Puma, because Puma is now seems to be taking the old Nike approach and signing a lot of players, Nike seem to be happy enough if Puma come along and offer enough money just to be like, yeah, right, like off you go. They might try and, they might snap up a young up and coming talent, but I can't see them battling with Adidas to sign Neuer or with Puma to try and sign Oblak. Even though they're two of the best goalkeepers in the world, I don't think they're really interested, to be honest, because it's not what they're trying to do right now. And I can see them say, we should do this. When the Premier League starts, we'll make another video. We'll have a look at how we get on in the first weeks of the Premier League. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Nike, again, in third place behind Adidas and Puma when it comes to keepers.
Definitely possible. I mean, if I stop and think about gloves, I'm just running back through my notes of who was wearing what. I think Courtois had the only pair of Nike gloves at the tournament. Hugo Lloris was in Reusch, Livakovic was in Reusch, David Marshall was in Callier. I don't think anyone else had Nike gloves. And their main model, the Vapor Grip 3, it's average. They just don't really care.
No. Like, I just don't think it's high on their priority list right now. And I think that with this kind of change of direction, not only are they changing direction within football as a whole, but their emphasis on goalkeepers has taken a bigger dip. So they're like, it's almost like they're prioritizing certain players, but they're also prioritizing certain positions. So they're prioritizing the glamour players, the big names, the young players, but also the forwards and things like that. And until somebody comes along who is that, big, young, maybe an English goalkeeper, because they generate a lot of press, that could be, that could be where they basically don't really put a lot of money into it. And as you say, the Vapor Grip 3 is meh. There's better options out there for half the money.
Yeah, literally. Danny Ward, may have been wearing night gloves as well, but he's Welsh and they're a small footballing nation. James said it, not me. Don't at me.
Thrown under the bus. Thrown under the bus.
Oh, I forgot I had these here. Look what I have. Oh, look at these. It's the rare lesser spotted Adidas Nemesis. Never seen before on a BootWizard channel.
I know. You know, it's funny you mentioned the Nemesis again, because Russia actually, I did these stats off the keepers that appeared in match day 1. Russia actually changed their keeper after match day 1. The lad that replaced Anton Shunin wore the Future. I could have cut Nemesis off the list entirely. I just couldn't do that to you.
It would have upset me greatly. It really would have done. Like, you can't any excuse to break them out, like, in this hideous colorway. I have two. This is how much I love the boot. I have 2 pairs of this boot in this exact colorway, one SG, one FG, and I think it's terrible. I think it's a terrible colorway, and I have 2 pairs of it.
I'm sorry, I'm just not with you. That boot's outrageous. I love it. It's fantastic.
Let us know in the comments. What do you think?
All right. We have made it this far without waking up my sleeping baby. So let's quit while we're ahead. But before we go, all the boots we've talked about tonight, what's your number 1 keeper's boot?
Oh, GT.
Hard to be mad with that. Hard to be mad. It's got the grip, decent traction, little bit better lockdown. And yeah, like we talked about before, a bit of quad fit, tighten up the laces, I'd be on board. Me, I'm going to go Puma Future, I reckon. It's a little bit underwhelming, but you don't need fancy as a keeper. You need trustworthy.
You know what? I was literally there and I was about to say Future. I went GT, but that's personal. But I think you could be onto something with the Future.
Definitely. All right, James, it's been a pleasure talking through these boots with you, my friend. Like I said, let's look at these numbers again when the Premier League season starts. Be interested to see if there's any shift in that. But for now, again, commiserations on the result. But there is always Qatar 2020. You've got a young squad. Let's see what happens.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Pleasure as always to have you on, Tom.
Excellent. Take care, my friend.
See you later, man. Bye-bye.